Hey everyone, I'm Kevin with JcrOffroad. In this video, I'll be walking you through our bumper install for the rear of your JL Wrangler. So once you have the factory rear bumper removed, you're going to need to pull this factory sensor wiring harness out of it along with the corresponding grommets. You want to try and keep these with the appropriate sensor, and then this can be installed into your new bumper to get it ready to go on the vehicle. So you want to make sure that this main wire harness connection winds up over here on the driver's side, and then you can take the appropriate bezel, line up these little tabs with the cutout here in the bumper, and then you can take your sensor and push it in flush, making sure it snaps in place. Then you can just repeat that same process with the remaining 3 sensors. Now, when you're routing this wire harness, it is important to get it routed up through the cutouts here in these bumper brackets, and that's just going to hold it up as well as back far enough that it doesn't get caught between the bumper mounting brackets and the frame during installation. Once you have the harness all in place, you can go ahead and install any pod lights you're going to be running at this time. Those should simply slide into the corresponding locations, and you can easily access the hardware here on the back side. So before the bumper can actually be mounted to the vehicle, you need to start by installing these outer tie-in brackets. So there is going to be a driver and a passenger side here. You need to pay a little bit of attention to how those mount. You're going to grab the driver's side bracket that looks like this and simply place it down in this corner between the frame and the body mount. And then you can begin installing it here with 2 14mm bolts and washers through the side into these factory threaded holes. Go ahead and push that in tight to the corner. So once you have these bolted in place, what needs to happen is you're going to need to mark and drill for this hole location as well as the one here through this top tab. You can do this a couple different ways. You can kind of see we've already got ours done, but you'll either use the bracket as a guide and drill right through with the bracket in place, or if you're worried about damaging the finish, don't want to have to do any touch-up, things like that, you can always mark these now, pull the bracket off, and then center punch and drill those holes, and then put the bracket back up in place. So once you have the bracket in place with these 2 side bolts, you're going to need to mark and drill both this top as well as this side hole to accept 1/2-inch hardware. You can do that by either marking and center punching these and then removing the bracket, getting your holes drilled, or you can leave the bracket in place and use it as a guide to drill those holes. That's kind of up to you. Once you get those drilled and you're at this point, you can grab the 1-inch long 1/2-inch hex bolts, 1/2-inch washers, as well as serrated flange nuts, and get one of those installed into each hole location. Then you can tighten both the side and top mounting bolt. And once those are tight and holding the bracket in place, you can then remove the 2 side bolts, as the bumper will need to slide over this bracket during the final assembly. Then just go repeat that process on the other side to get your passenger side tie-in installed. Next, over here on the passenger side, you're going to need to install this nut tab into this rear frame rail. That simply needs to slide in like so and line up with these 2 bottom mounting holes. Over on the driver's side, there's already going to be factory nuts welded into the frame, so you don't have to worry about this over there. Now, if your Jeep's equipped with a factory hitch and this 7-pin connector, you're going to need to grab a 16mm socket and temporarily drop this bracket down out of place. And that can simply hang right there for now. Now you can grab a friend to help you lift the bumper up in place. Once you get it up here, you can start by dropping 2 of these 1/2-inch button head bolts down through the top holes on either side to kind of help locate it, and install 1/2-inch serrated flange nuts to the bottom of those. Now, just a tip we wanted to give you when you're installing these button heads is if you're having trouble accessing from the inside here to get these nuts in place or get anything tight, you can always loosen up your light, or in some cases even remove it through this outside cutout, and that should give you a little bit more room to work in there. Next, we can come back over here to the side and reinstall the 2 14mm bolts that we removed earlier. And then on the bottom side, you'll be installing 2 more here through these slots. Over on the passenger side, you'll be using 2 long 1/2-inch bolts that'll go into that nut plate that you installed before the bumper went on. And you want to make sure you're leaving all this hardware loose until it's all in place. Next, you can grab one of your 4-inch long 1/2-inch bolts along with a washer and install it through this bottom slot here and up through that factory frame cross member. And then reaching through the cutout here, you can install a washer and nylon locking nut. Now, this is over on the passenger side. When you get over to the driver's side, you're just going to have the bottom hole pre-drilled in the factory frame. However, on the top of that cross member, there is not a corresponding hole, so we're going to have to drill that before we can get that bolt installed. So to get this one drilled over here on the driver's side, like I said, this bottom hole is already in place, so you kind of just want to center your drill on our slot. I'm starting with a little bit smaller drill bit as somewhat of a pilot hole, and then you just need to kind of try and make sure that your drill stays parallel in both directions, so you wind up drilling through in the correct location up top. Then you can follow that up with a 1/2-inch bit to clearance it out for your bolt. Once you get that drilled all the way through, you can simply install the same 1/2-inch hardware setup as you used over on the other side. So with all your hardware loosely in place, you can begin tightening things up. We're going to start up here with these 1/2-inch button heads using a 5/16 hex, being serrated flange nuts on the bottom side. Those should grab just like this. You may have to kind of just hold it with your hand to get started until it bites into the material, and then you can tighten those down. Following that, you can do this bottom hardware that runs straight up into the frame. Over here on the driver's side, you'll need a 22. On the passenger side, that's going to be those 1/2-inch bolts that go into that nut plate. So those you'll need a 3/4. Next, we'll tighten up the 14mm hardware going into the side of the frame. So for that, you'll need your 22 again, but you're also going to want to grab a swivel extension like I have here. And that should just get you in there a little bit easier behind the light tab to tighten these up. Then lastly, with your 3/4 socket and wrench this time, you can tighten up those 2 through bolts that run up through this frame cross member. Now there's not going to be a sleeve or anything in there fully supporting that frame structure. That's why those have a nylock nut. So you just got to use your discretion as you tighten those up and not go too far. Once you have those 2 bottom through bolts tight, you can come back and reinstall that factory trailer wiring plug. Now at this point, if you're going to be installing adventure carriers, you're going to want to check out our adventure carrier installation video at this time while you still have this center panel removed. If you're not going to be running those, or if you've already checked that out and you've got your center latch mounting brackets and stuff in place, we can go ahead and get this center panel installed. So to get the center panel installed, you're going to be provided with 4 of these clip nuts. One is going to go on each of these outside mounting holes. They should just simply slide over top and line up with the hole. You just want to make sure you're paying attention to the orientation of the logo as you're putting these on. Then once you get all 4 clip nuts in place, you can take the panel, slide it in through this cutout, get it lined up. Once you have all 4 clip nuts in place, you can simply slide the panel in, get it lined up with the 4 corresponding mounting holes, and then install 4 of these 5/16 stainless button heads. Once those 4 are started, grab a 3/16 hex and tighten them up. Now for those of you not running carriers or only running them on one side, we're going to provide you with these black plastic caps. These we're going to recommend you put just a small bead of black RTV around, and then you can pop them in place to seal up these spindle sleeves on the side that you're not using. Now you're going to want to do that both top and bottom. That's just going to prevent any dust, dirt, debris, corrosion, things like that from happening in that spindle sleeve, so that you can simply pop those out later on if you choose to add an additional carrier. So next we're going to walk you through the wire routing for both the camera relocation as well as the third brake light and tail light setup. Ours has already been modified from a previous installation with a swing gate mounted tire mount setup. So if you're going from stock to this adventure carrier, it may vary just a little bit. So if you are going to be going from a completely stock setup to this adventure carrier, you're going to want to check out our license plate relocation video to walk you through that process. So to gain access to everything in here, we're going to need to open up our gate and remove this inner plastic panel. Mine's kind of already partially disassembled here, so you can go ahead and get that out of the way. That should give you access to get in behind here as well as work from the outside and pull the wires and that rubber grommet back through the outside of the gate and into this area. Just like so. So you're going to be supplied with this camera cable extension that can be plugged in here and then routed along the path we're about to show you. And then the excess can be tied up somewhere inside of this gate out of the way where it's not going to come in contact with any moving parts. So as far as the third brake light goes, you're going to need to find the black wire and the white wire with a green stripe that powers that, and add wire extension to route along the same path here and out to the carrier. And then depending on what setup you're running, your power for your license plate light can either be extended and routed along the same path, or if you're going from stock, you can get into the bumper wiring harness and tie into it down there, meet in this outside corner and route it up the shield carrier as well. So as far as routing the wire goes, once you get in here, you're just going to be tracing back along the factory wiring harness that's clipped in here, and you can zip tie right to it. That should keep everything in a nice safe place. Now you are going to need to access into this loom here and route your wires through it so that you can get them back here into the cabin area. For that, you can start by pulling this clip here just to give you a little bit better access to the harness. And then you're going to need to pull any tape that's holding this in place so that you can access the loom itself. Next, you're going to want a small pick or flat screwdriver so that you can actually get in here and pull the tab back that's locking this zip tie clip in place. And if you just work that a few times, you should be able to release that, set it off to the side, and reuse it later once you get all your wires routed through here. So next, to gain access to the other end of this loom, we're going to need to remove this interior panel. So you're going to have one small cover piece up here that needs to be removed by the seat belt. You should be able to do that with a panel tool or a flat screwdriver. And then under the center here, this lower trim panel should pop out pretty easily, allowing you to gain access to the edge of this interior panel. Then it should just be held in mostly with clips, so you can start working your way around and popping this free. Next, you're going to need to kind of repeat the same process as we did out here, right here. So removing this zip tie as well as any tape so that you can get your wires pushed through the loom, and then we'll trace them back up where you see our red and black wires here up into this top corner. So next, you're going to need a T40 Torx to come in here and unthread this plastic bolt head. Obviously, being plastic, you want to use a little bit of caution there, but this is going to let you remove the tail light out in this corner to gain access in there for wire routing. So once you get that unthreaded, the tail light should simply pull straight out, and you can kind of set it to the side as I have here. Or if you don't have some additional wiring tied into it like this, it could simply be unplugged and sat over on a bench for now. Now, looking at our wiring and following this factory harness, you can follow it straight up to the grommet that comes through the body here. That's where you're going to need to get your camera cable as well as third brake light power run through to follow and trace along this factory wiring harness. So to get it out of the body structure and underneath the tub so that we can run it up to this carrier, you're going to want to follow this section of factory harness, not the piece that plugs into the taillight. That'll come down through a hole inside of here and out underneath. You do want to make sure anywhere that it runs through this metal body structure that you either have it secure and safe inside of loom or heavily taped to protect those wires. So that'll bring you out right behind this rear tire in the wheel opening, where you can then again put the wire in loom and trace it along this factory harness down to this back corner of the tub. After you get that, you'll want to come up through here behind the spindle between the bumper and the body so you can start routing up the carrier. Once you get that all in place and tied up, it should look something like that, but again, wrapped in loom. So from there, you're just going to need to route this up along the carrier. We provide you with a bunch of zip tie locations here to hold it in place, and then just based on your personal preference, it can either run along this outside face, or there's openings to tuck it up inside here where it can then come back out here and then out through one of these cutouts to the tire mount and license plate. So once you get everything pulled through to here, it's just going to be a matter of tying in the third brake light as well as the license plate light power to whatever connection you choose, as well as plugging in that factory cable to the factory camera. Now again, as we mentioned before, our license plate relocation video is going to go through that more in depth, so go ahead and revert back to that for how this gets finished up here. So that's going to complete this bumper install. If you guys have any questions about this installation or any other JCR Off-Road product, feel free to reach out to us. You can send us an email at info@jcroffroad.com or give us a phone call at 269-353-1184.